Homeowners in Calgary are spending thousands of dollars on upgrades that they might regret down the road. It might look and sound like a great idea, but in the future, you might be left with a property that nobody wants. In this video, I'll let you know my thoughts on the most common upgrades that I see that a lot of homeowners actually regret. Let's take a look. All right, so let's start here. And this video is meant to be a combination of things. So I've been in the business since 2012, helping buyers and sellers throughout the process. And I've seen a few things when it comes to bad upgrades that are hindering sales. So my own experiences, I've searched the internet and seeing what other people are saying as well. And I've also asked ChatGPT to list off what they think are the most common regrets people have when it comes to home renovations in Calgary. And I've also thrown some upgrades that people didn't do that they regret not doing. And point number one is choosing cosmetic updates in favor of the core systems. So what I mean by that is people are choosing renovations like granite countertops and paint over the core features like the roof, the windows, the furnace, electrical, plumbing, air conditioning, stuff like that. So what happens is when it comes time to sell, a lot of buyers just assume those things are taken care of. They do a home inspection and they find out the windows are ancient, the furnace has never been cleaned, just stuff like that. And it can come back to haunt you. So if you are thinking of renovating a property, don't skimp out on the core features in favor of the flashy cosmetic updates, because when a buyer does look at it with a fine-tooth comb and they have a professional home inspector, they will uncover a lot of these issues and it can come back to haunt you. And the next section, let's talk about some of the issues with Calgary's harsh climate and how it applies to home renovations. And I got my notes here just because some of these are from ChatGPT. And the first one here is no insulation upgrades. Now, this one's not a huge deal breaker for the most part, but the codes have changed. And I find after home inspections, they always come back and they're talking about the insulation levels are inadequate compared to today's codes. And they're always going after the attic hatch. In the past, I guess it wasn't insulated. So that's one of the concerns nowadays. It's not a deal breaker for the most part, but it can be annoying after a home inspection. So if you are renovating a property, don't skimp out on the insulation because it can be a bit of a headache after an inspection. And it seems to come up all the time nowadays. So it doesn't cost all that much money to do this. So if you are renovating a property, it can't hurt to add more insulation in the attic and the attic hatch cover. And the next point, this is also a ChatGPT point. They're saying luxury floors with no heating. Seems kind of vague, but what I will say is in basements, it gets very cold in Calgary in the wintertime. And when you renovate a basement and you just have like tile or laminate, it's not the best. I find carpet is better in the basement just because it gets so cold. And that's one thing that people notice during showings, especially if the home is vacant and the heat is turned down. When you go and show a basement, it can be absolutely freezing down there. So I find that carpet is a little bit better in the basement. This is just my personal preference. This isn't really a deal breaker for a lot of people, but I just think it can be a bit more helpful to renovate the basement with carpet. Again, my personal preference. Next point, no sump pump in the basement. From my experience, buyers don't really look at this too often, but I would definitely have one, especially if you're in flood-prone areas. And it's not the hardest thing to get hooked up. So this is just a minor thing. I think it wouldn't be a deal breaker for me, but it's nice to have for sure. And the next point is a finished basement with no moisture control. So to give you an example, I had a listing that I sold in Falcon Ridge a couple of years ago now. And so we listed it. We didn't know of any issues. It sold right away. They did the home inspection and it fell apart because there was mold all over the basement. And what caused it is there was a family living down there. It was a tenant's basement. And the bathroom didn't have a fan. So the moisture just kept building up and building up. And eventually it just caused a bunch of mold. And it took us 2 or 3 buyers to actually sell it because everybody was terrified of the mold. And eventually an investor bought it. It was a corner lot, and I think he bulldozed it to make like a townhouse or whatever. So if you do renovate a basement, don't skimp out on the ventilation in the bathroom because it can come back to hurt you. And the next 2 points are from ChatGPT. And the first one here, detached garages with no heat, useless in the winter. Now, I don't know if I agree with this one. I would say most garages in Calgary don't have heat. Maybe 30% that I've sold have a heated garage. And which is nice to have, but it's definitely not a deal breaker. So again, I wouldn't put too much emphasis on this point. Again, good to have, but not a deal breaker for a lot of buyers, and not that difficult to put in. And the last one here is skipping air conditioning altogether. So again, this is nice to have, but it's not a deal breaker, especially in Calgary, our harsh climate. And it gets cold at night here, so it's definitely not a must-have in Calgary, but it's nice to have. And especially if you're in a condo that's very sunny, it gets super hot in there. So if you are on the fence about buying an air conditioning unit, I would probably do it, especially if you're in a condo. Again, nice to have, but not a deal breaker for most people. And the next section here is bad layout choices and room conversions. And the first point would be converting your garage into a living space. Now, for the most part, this is a bad idea. You know, there's a certain percentage of the population that will love this. Like, oh my God, I can rent the garage out and help with the mortgage. Things are awesome. But most buyers won't like that. Most people will want to have the garage for cars. So you're limiting the buyer pool when you do something like this. But if it's for you and that's what you want to do, sure, go for it. I'm just talking about in terms of resale value, you are limiting the buyer pool when you do something like that. Next point, converting bedrooms into offices and walk-in closets. Now, this can be good and bad. I've sold plenty of properties with these old bungalows where they turn a small bedroom into an office or like an extended closet. So it can be good. But whenever you take away a bedroom, you are limiting your chance to sell it to more buyers. So there are less buyers for properties that have 2 bedrooms up than there are for 3 bedrooms. Most families want to have at least 3 bedrooms upstairs. And this is one of the main ways that we narrow down the search for buyers is by bedrooms, bathrooms, age, size, etc. So if you do take away bedrooms, you do limit the buyer pool again. And sometimes when you do this, the property just becomes a bit too custom. And for example, I sold a property a couple of years back now in Varsity, a very nice neighborhood. And it was, your old-fashioned bungalow with 3 bedrooms upstairs. And he converted, I think it was 1 or 2 bedrooms into a giant office that had all this custom-built cabinetry, very nice office. But you do limit the buyer pool when you do this. And it became so custom that a lot of buyers just couldn't see themselves in it. So if it's good for you, sure, great. But if you are looking at resale value, I would probably limit stuff like this. And if we go back to the basement developments, if I see a property that has a finished basement and there's no bedroom or bathroom downstairs, I think it's almost a complete waste of time and money. The value in a finished basement is having living quarters, a bathroom, or if it's a suited basement, having a kitchen in there. If it's just like a finished space, it's just like a wide open finished space, there's almost no value in that. And I think you wasted your time and your money. So if you are going to finish a basement, it's good to have at least 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom. Otherwise, you're probably wasting your time for the most part. And the last point here, let's talk about sunrooms. Now, I find a sunroom is almost always a waste of time and money. It depends how you look at it. If it's for your own benefit, sure, go for it. Enjoy it. But if you are looking at it in terms of resale value, I find it's almost not worth the hassle, the time and the money. And for example, I had a listing in Deer Ridge Estates a while back now, maybe 2021, 2022. The market was still really good back then, and we couldn't give this listing away. And it had the most amazing sunroom, but it was just so custom that a lot of buyers couldn't see themselves living in it. So in terms of sunrooms, I probably wouldn't go all out because you're most likely not going to get all of your money back, and they can be hard to sell sometimes. And the next point is cosmetic trends that date quickly. So there are some things out there that only last a couple seasons and then it's out of style. So you want to avoid things like that. And one of the big things here is weird paint colors. I'd probably always go neutral, especially if you're trying to sell a property. Neutral is best. You'd be surprised at how often I'll show a property that a buyer likes, but they don't go for it because of the weird paint job. And I might ask them, hey, can't you just paint it or whatever? And you'd be shocked at how many buyers don't want to do anything. They just want to have it move-in ready. So when you have a weird, bizarre paint color, it definitely hurts your chances of selling a property. And I guess you just have to ask yourself, is it going to stand the test of time or will this fade out quickly? That's how I look at cosmetic updates. And in terms of cosmetics, one thing I've noticed that's a real deal breaker is having too many flooring types. So it's very normal to walk into a property and see like ceramic tile at the front entrance and then maybe hardwood. But I've seen it where you have that and then the flooring on the stairs is different. Then I've seen flooring different in each bedroom and it becomes a real overwhelming mess. And this is quite common. I see this all the time when I'm showing properties. And it seems to be people that are doing things themselves, like the handy people, and they just pick one thing for this job, then maybe a few months later they try something else, and it just becomes a bit overwhelming. So I probably wouldn't do this. It looks kind of unprofessional, and it's a bit overwhelming, and these properties have a tough time selling. So I would try to have a uniform type of renovation throughout the property if possible. And the next section is outdoor upgrades that don't work that well in Calgary. And the first point here would be outdoor kitchens. Now, I've seen this quite a few times online, doing some research for this video. And to be honest, I haven't really seen that many outdoor kitchens in Calgary. I think it's a cool idea, but if I did it myself, I wouldn't expect a huge return on it. You could have two identical properties and one has an outdoor kitchen and they could probably sell for the same price. So if you're doing it for your own benefit, that's fantastic, but I wouldn't expect a huge return on it when it comes time to selling the property. And the next point are pools and hot tubs. Now, I think in most locations in the world, having a pool or a hot tub is fantastic. In Calgary, pools are not a huge seller, and it can actually hinder your sale. I've had two listings in the past, both in Varsity Estates, both with indoor pools, and we had 1 million showings, but nobody seemed to want it. I sold one of them after like 100 showings, and the other one actually expired, and nobody seemed to want it. Both are very interesting properties, but you do limit your buyer pool when it comes to having an indoor pool. Lots of maintenance. You can smell some of the chlorine in the house, humidity issues. Just a lot of buyers don't seem to want that. I mean, I love swimming. I think it'd be fantastic to have a pool property, but I think it'd be tough to sell it in the future. Calgary is just not much of a pool climate location. Hot tubs, I think, are pretty cool as well to have. But from my experience, most of the time the buyer doesn't want it in the purchase contract, and they don't really add any value for it, even if it's built in. So if you're buying it for your own benefit, sure, fantastic, but don't expect to have any kind of return on it when you sell your property, for the most part. Next point, let's talk about decks. Now, having a deck is fantastic, but I wouldn't be going all out and building a massive deck that costs a lot of money. I think you could have two identical properties, and one has a regular size deck and one has this extravagant, awesome deck, and they could probably sell it for the exact same price. So again, it's good to have, but not a must, and you're probably not going to get a huge return on it. And the next point is playground equipment. Now, I don't see this all that often, but when I have sold properties like this that have like swing sets and stuff like that, most of the time the buyer puts it as a term in the contract to get rid of that stuff before possession. So again, if you bought it for your children, you're having fun with it, that's great, but don't expect to get any money from it when it comes time to sell your property. It's very specific to each person, and that next buyer probably doesn't want it. And it can become a headache because you have to get rid of it before possession. There could be holdbacks involved. So don't expect that it adds any value to your property having like a play set in your backyard. And the last section here, just a few random points that I came up with. And the first one here being permits. Now, if you do a renovation on a property and you don't have permits, it can really bite you in the future when it comes time to sell a property. The buyer's agent, the home inspector can spot these, and it can hurt your chances of selling. I've seen lots of transactions fall apart because of issues like this. So the buyer doesn't want to hear that your handy uncle did the electrical. That's not going to fly. And home inspectors can find this stuff pretty quickly. And in terms of renovations, I would assume that it's going to take longer than what you've anticipated. It's probably going to cost 20% more. So just be mindful of that. I would also be mindful of having super high-end appliances and kitchens in a very modest neighborhood. So if you're showing a property in, say, Marlborough, where all the properties are like 500,000, and you have a really fancy refrigerator that has like a computer panel on the front and like a really high-end kitchen, you're probably not going to get your money back for that. So it has to kind of match the neighborhood. So you don't want to be overbuilt for the area. And let's talk about do-it-yourself renovations. I've showed 1 million properties, and when it looks like the homeowner did the renovations, I find most buyers walk away from those properties. So if you are going to do some renovations, make sure that it looks like it's done professionally, because very rarely have I seen a buyer buy a property that looks like the homeowner did most of the work. They just don't seem to work out that well from what I've seen. And the last point here, and I should have mentioned this earlier, is I would shy away from properties that have extensive landscaping. Now, for example, I sold a property in Mount Pleasant, I think it was like way back in 2018, and the entire front and backyard was a giant garden. It was like a giant flower. And the amount of maintenance to keep this property looking good was intense. So if it's an overly landscaped yard, there are some maintenance issues that can scare away a lot of buyers. Well, there you have it. That's my take on the upgrades that a lot of sellers regret making. And I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions at all or need some help buying, selling, or relocating, I'd love to be a resource and help you out. You can call, text, email, or comment. I will get it and get back to you. And if you go to the pinned comment, I have a buyer's guide, seller's guide, and a relocation guide, all free for download, as well as my contact information. Again, I'd love to be a resource, and I will see you on the next video.